God bless, God bless, God bless. I love you so much. This is David, the Reckless Rabbi. And as you can see, I have a little bit of a light in my eyes. And, every child of God has this. And I was watching an interview with the former warlock yesterday. And when he sold his soul to the devil, he lost the light in his eyes. And even he was allowed to come back into the grace of God because God showed mercy to him. So whenever you feel like you want to judge someone or you can't stand them, even if they don't have a light in their eyes, that light might come back. Speaking of such things, of selling your soul, the war between the army of light and the army of darkness is now. I saw last night a vision of Satan and Saint Michael struggling. And you may wonder why Saint Michael is struggling, because he has God behind him, because the world is really lost right now. My partner, Michael Dimitro in the Reckless Rabbis, told me that at least 50% of people are making demonic contracts right now. And the other 50%, you can imagine, are addicted to alcohol, drugs, pornography, sex, escorts, prostitution. The world is in a very bad place right now. And St. Michael is just outnumbered, and he's so mighty that even though maybe he's outnumbered, 97.5% to 2.5%, he's still triumphing. But it's a struggle for him. So my goal with these videos is to add to the army of light, to cultivate the God inside of you, so that Saint Michael just doesn't have to struggle so much. And God bless Saint Michael. I put my cross over him to increase his armor in this terrible struggle that he has to fight. But he does it willingly. He does it wholeheartedly. When Satan betrayed God, Saint Michael was right at God's side, and he would never ever betray him. I want to talk about St. Paul's Romans today. St. Paul Romans is a very complicated book because he tells us that we don't have to follow the law. And Jesus Christ, when he came, of course, in the Gospel, says that he did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. And he kept all 613 commandments. He never broke a commandment. He may have been radical in certain ways, where he may have allowed his disciples to pick grain on the Sabbath, or he might have healed on the Sabbath, but these were emergency situations where a life was at stake, a soul was at stake, and was man made for the Sabbath, or was the Sabbath made for man? But he still kept the Sabbath, he still prayed, he still kept it holy. And what is holier than to heal someone or to save someone's life? That is the greatest holiness. St. Paul says in the book of Romans that we are saved by grace, and that we no longer have to follow the law. We are no longer under the law. How can we reconcile this with Jesus Christ, who says that he came to fulfill the law? Well, St. Paul says it is the law that makes us sin. It is the negative commandments that make us break them. Think about Adam in the Garden of Eden. He kept 100% faith of God until God gave him a negative commandment not to eat from the tree. And as soon as God said, don't do this, he did it. It's the mere fact of a negative commandment saying don't do something, that the idea of doing that thing comes into the head. St. Paul says, I was told don't kill before I even know what killing was. It's the fact that I was told don't kill that made me know what killing was. So St. Paul is operating under the idea that all men fall short of the glory of God, and that we're all sinners. It's impossible for us to keep the law. Now, Jesus came to fulfill the law because he was God himself, and God can keep the commandments, because God invented the commandments. And but we are not Jesus. We fall short of the glory. So St. Paul believed that we are saved by grace, by the crucifixion, by God's sacrifice for us. But he says very clearly, does this mean we can sin as much as we want? I think people are under this false conception that since we're under grace, we can sin as much as we want. I believe personally that sin is its own punishment. That when you sin, you're doing something outside of the grace of God, and that you no longer are really in tune with God, and therefore being outside of God it's a mini version of hell. Because what is hell but anything outside of God's reach? Well, of course he can reach it, but he chooses not to be there. So when you sin, it's a little bit of hell for you. So St. Paul, of course, says that we want to be in tune with God, so don't sin, But if you do, we are forgiven by grace. But don't, my advice to you today is this, to the backsliding Christians, the Christians who go to the club and party and believe that they can go to church and are saved. Sin is its own punishment. When you're partying, when you're doing drugs and alcohol, you're outside the grace of God. So you want to be inside the grace of God. You want to follow the commandments. But if you do fail, because we are fragile, we are human, rely on that grace to save you. God bless, God bless, God bless. This is a war right now. We are fighting, and it's a spiritual war. Do not physically take up armor. Do not chastise your enemy. Love your enemy. That is light can overcome the darkness. Jesus Christ is the light in the world. Be a light. Be a light like Jesus. Remember, you're not Jesus. Be a light like Jesus. God bless, God bless, God bless. I love you so much. I look forward to fighting this spiritual war with you.